All right, let's try this again. Okay, here we are with another installment. And this time we are covering the epidermis and dermis, layers of the two major layers of the integument. So let's talk about the function of the integument, where we left off before. Some major functions here. The integument, remember, covers the entire body. Its number one job is protection. Protects against trauma, toxic substances, solar radiation. Think all the times where you bump up against something, you scrape up against something, you spill something on your body, or you're out in the sun. Uh, some chemicals can be absorbed despite the layer of protection from our skin. Think about like a nicotine patch or a birth control patch. Those hormones can be directly absorbed through the skin. So, in that respect, we refer to the skin as selectively permeable. So, the word permeable means allowing substance to go through. Selectively permeable means that only certain substances can go through. So the skin is considered to be selectively permeable. Some things get in, other things do not. Uh, Skin is definitely important for the prevention of water loss and water gain. The skin is considered to be water resistant, but it's not completely waterproof due to what we call trans epidermal water loss, TEWL. This includes both the insensible perspiration, so sweating when you don't feel like you're sweating or don't see any signs of sweating, and sensible perspiration where you see visible sweating. Definitely, the skin is responsible also for temperature regulation. The dilation of blood vessels. So, dilation means when the vessels get bigger and they allow more blood to come through. That allows more blood to be closer to the surface of the skin, more superficial, and that allows for the release of heat. And so that's why we get our skin tends to look more red or flushed when we're hot or it's hot outside. And then constriction of blood vessels that constricts or prevents blood from being close to the superficial or outer portion of the skin. That helps to keep our core body temperature in the core and maintains our core body temperature of 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Important to know. Uh, the integument is important for metabolic regulation. This word metabolism or metabolic refers to all the chemical reactions that are happening in our body. One example is vitamin D3 is produced by some skin cells and converted to calcitriol by the kidneys. Why is this important? Well, calcitriol is a hormone involved in calcium homeostasis. So that's the maintenance of the proper amounts of calcium running through our blood. Calcium, is primarily important for the strength of our bones. Calcium also vital for muscle contraction. Skin is also important for immune defense. It's their major preventer from viruses and other bacteria and fungi, things that could potentially harm us. So we have these epidermal dendritic cells that help initiate any immune response and identify friend or foe on our skin. And then, of course, our skin is responsible for sensory reception. So we have many skin receptors that help detect changes in temperature and touch, pressure and pain, lots of nerve endings going into our skin. For example, we have these tactile cells that stimulate the nerve endings in response to touch, and they would send a signal to the brain to say, I'm touching something. A secretion is the last function here. Secretion, sweating for cooling the body, and then lubrication of hair and skin with sebum or oils that help to keep that skin waterproof, keep it elastic and stretchy. And those are the functions of the integumentary system. So let's talk about the two major layers of the integument. the epidermis, and the dermis. So the epithelium of the skin is known as the epidermis. Remember, epithelium are tissue types that are designed to cover and protect. And in the epidermis, we mostly have that keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium. So again, squamous means squished looking cells, stratified, many layers of them. And when they're keratinized, they're actually dead cells filled with this waxy substance called keratin. It's a protein, and that helps to give lots of protection to that outer layer, that superficial layer of skin, which is most likely going to scrape on things like sticks and sides of tables and things like that. The epidermis is avascular. That means it does not have any blood supply to it. And most of the cells here are actually dead or dying. And it's composed of several layers, which we call strata. These are the 5 strata, and I'm going to list them from deep to superficial. Remember, deep is one of our directional terms. That means towards the inside. Superficial means towards the outside. So deepest is the stratum basale, the basal layer. Basal basically means like base or bottom. Stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, stratum lucidium, which is only found in thick skin, and the stratum corneum. And in a bit, I'm going to go through those, and I have some slides with the functions and more detail on these. I'm going to blow through those pretty quick for the sake of the video, but I would recommend spending some time studying those and reading those in your book. So here we have our epidural stratum side by side. So again, here's the microscope view on the left. You see all these layers of skin, and it's got this white appearance to it. Those are the keratinized dead cells, right? So many layers. Look over here, it says dead keratinocytes, right? They are cells that produce keratin, and they're actually dead. And then you can see under here, we have this layer, the stratum lucidium, and you can see the nuclei are still there. They look a little bit squished. Again, you can see in the model over here, the cells look squished. Beneath them or deep to them is the stratum spinosum. These are the cells, and basically what's happening is the cells are being born here, and as more cells are produced deep to them, the cells get pushed more superficial, and then they start to squish. Then they die and get filled with that keratin, and they create this nice barrier on the outer skin. And then down here is that stratum basale, right? That base layer, and the dermis is the other major layer of integument that we're going to study. Again, we're going to move through these pretty quick. Just some things to think about. So the type of cells, these are cuboidal to low columnar in appearance. Keratinocytes, right? They make that keratin protein. Melanocytes, that's cells that produce melanin. It's a pigment we'll talk about in a minute here. And tactile cells sensitive to the touch. The stratum spinosum, right? Many layers of polygonal keratinocytes, right? These are the daughter cells from the basal layer differentiating, right? So daughter cells, we talked about mitosis. These are the cells produced from mitosis. Differentiating means that they are going into that G0 phase, and they're not dividing anymore. And then we have the stratum granulosum, right? 3 to 5 layers of keratinocytes undergoing keratinization. So they are actively being filled with that keratin, and they're starting to degrade and become basically dead cells. That stratum lucidium, that thin translucent cell, 2 to 3 layers thick, only present in thick skin, which we find in the palms of our hands, soles of our feet. And these are filled with a different type of protein, L-idium. The stratum corneum, It's most superficial stratum in the epidermis, many layers of dead, scaly, interlocking keratinized cells called corneocytes. They are anucleate. That means they do not have a nucleus anymore, no longer living, and they're packed tightly together. Some variations in the epidermis. We have the thick skin, right? It contains 5 layers in the epidermis, includes the stratum lucidium. We find this in the palms of our hands, soles of our feet. It has no hair follicles or oil-producing sebaceous glands. And then we talk about the thin skin. This is what covers the rest of our body. It lacks that stratum lucidium layer. It covers most of our body, and it's a little bit thinner, hence the name. Again, here's a side-by-side. The thick skin, look how thick the stratum corneum is. And then it has that stratum lucidium layer in there, as opposed to the thin skin, where you can see it's kind of less layers here, and the cells are much closer to the surface. Some interesting things about skin is skin color is made primarily determined by 3 proteins: hemoglobin, melanin, and keratin. Hemoglobin is that protein that attracts oxygen in our blood. Keratin is this kind of yellow-orange pigment we get from foods such as carrots. It does build up in the skin, but primarily our skin tone is based on this pigment called melanin. A pigment is anything that will absorb light and either reflect it or hang on to it. And actually, melanin is really interesting, and our skin evolution of our skin color is really interesting. A lot of people think that our skin color is due to protection from skin cancer, which it does help, but evolutionarily, that's not really the driver, because we get skin cancer typically later in life after we have reproduced. So basically, our skin tone is a compromise between protecting our unborn babies from folate breakdown or folic acid breakdown, and on the other extreme, the breakdown of vitamin D. So in high UV areas around the world, think around the equator, that folate in an unborn baby is exposed to a lot of UV light, and it can actually create birth defects if not protected. Whereas in northern and southern areas towards the poles, where there's less UV light, we see that we need that UV light to help break down that vitamin D to control our calcium levels and build our bones. And so a lack of vitamin D will actually lead to some complications like rickets, with weak bones. So closer to the equator, we get plenty of vitamin D, so darker skin is more beneficial. Farther away from the equator, where we need more vitamin D and are less prone to that UV degradation of the folic acid. So we have lighter skin. People tend to have originated farther from the equator. So I always think that's kind of interesting, and just put that in your Easter basket, I guess. Here we go, talking a little bit about the production of melanin and the pigmentation of dark skin, and you have lots of those melanin pigments just within these keratinocytes. So let's talk about the second layer of skin, the dermis. The dermis lies deep, again, that means towards the center of the body, to the epidermis. It's composed of both areolar and dense irregular connective tissues. So it's good to go back and review what those types of tissues are, how they might look under the microscope, and what distinguishes them. There's 2 layers in the dermis, the papillary layer and the reticular layer. The papillary layer is more superficial towards the outside, and it butts up against the epidermis. And the deeper, thicker layer is the reticular layer. So again, here's our epidermis out here. We already talked about that. And then as we go in deep, we have the dermis, which is all of this layer here. We have that papillary layer that butts up against the epidermis, and then the reticular layer, and you can see all of the structures inside of there. And then we have our arteries and vein. The vascular tissue is down here, butting up against the subcutaneous layer, which we'll talk about in a future video. Now, papillary layer, right? It's superficial. It's composed of that areolar connective tissue. You have the dermal papillae are projections of the dermis, right? That helps create these epidermal ridges, increases the surface area between those. And when we say surface areas, that's more of that connection area between there. And then the reticular layer is the deeper layer of the dermis that forms the majority of its thickness. It's comprised of that dense, irregular connective tissue. Large collagen bundles project in all directions and includes many of those blood vessels, the glands, the hair follicles, and the nerves within our skin. One interesting side note that, I guess it's a side note, but something to talk about are these ideas of lines of cleavage. So as we look at the epidermis, or we look at the integumentary system, the majority of collagen and elastic fibers are oriented parallel to each other, okay, at specific locations. And they function to resist kind of the routine stretching and stretches of our body. And we refer to these as lines of cleavage or tension lines. And we can identify the orientation of these fiber bundles. This is really important when we think of surgery and making incisions. So any incision that cuts across these parallel lines is going to really pull open, and it's going to take a long time to heal. Whereas an incision or a cut that is parallel to those lines will actually heal up better. So surgeons take this into account when they are deciding where to make an incision, and they attempt to make those incisions parallel to these lines. And then, of course, when our skin is overstretched, those collagen fibers may tear, and that leads to these striae or stretch marks. So this is just an image showing those lines of cleavage, and you can kind of see how they are and where they change. And again, an incision that's perpendicular across those lines is gonna pull open and be difficult to heal, whereas one that's parallel should heal fairly quickly or more quickly. And so that's our tour of the dermis and epidermis, and hopefully that was a little bit helpful. Go ahead and get back into your book and dig deeper into those and learn to understand those functions. All right, and that's it for this one.